What if I told you that Africa is the youngest continent in the world? More than half of Africans are under, so what will tomorrow's Africa look like? Today, we are going to explore Pan-Africanism not as a dusty memory, but as a burning engine of the present and future. Pan-Africanism is the idea that peoples of African origin, on the continent and in the diaspora, are united by a common history, culture, and destiny. But this idea is not frozen in the past. It reinvents itself every day. In this course, we will see how young people like you, entrepreneurs, artists, and heads of state are building tomorrow's Africa. We will talk about technologies, startups that are transforming cities, the African Union's Agenda 2063, and the African Continental Free Trade Area, AfCFTA. We will see that modern Pan-Africanism is a concrete force that creates jobs, bridges, and hopes. We will use authentic sources to understand this movement. For example, the narrative 12 Years a Slave reminds us of the roots of the struggle, but our gaze will be turned towards the future. Today's Africa is no longer a continent that is assisted, but a continent that acts. The documents we have, like Mafrica's slave trade and African American poetry, show us a path of resilience and creation. But instead of dwelling on the pains, we will see how poetry becomes a cry for freedom, how travel narratives like the Tramp sketches speak to us of the quest for meaning. 21st century Pan-Africanism is the ability to transform the chains of the past into levers for the future. It is a movement that connects Lagos, Nairobi, Paris, New York, and Rio de Janeiro. It is carried by artists like Burna Boy or Wizkid, entrepreneurs like those at Jumia or Flutterwave, and visionaries building smart cities like Konza Technopolis in Kenya. So, hold on tight, because we are going to travel through time and space, from a painful past to a radiant future, passing through the bubbling present of Africa. SEP First Part, The Modern Foundations of Pan-Africanism. Contemporary Pan-Africanism does not start from scratch. It is based on ancient texts and struggles. But how does this idea manifest itself today? First, it must be understood that modern Pan-Africanism is institutional. The African Union, AU, created in 2002, is the symbol of this political unity. Its Agenda 2063 is a master plan to transform Africa into an integrated, prosperous, and peaceful continent. It is a Pan-African project par excellence. For example, one of the goals is to end all wars in Africa by 2020, a goal not yet achieved, but the will is there. Next, there is the African Continental Free Trade Area, AfCFTA. Launched in, it is the largest free trade area in the world by number of participating countries.
See Pan-Africanism. The source documents we use, like Africa slave trade, remind us that for centuries, Africa was plundered of its resources and its people. The slave trade tore the continent apart. Today, the AfCFTA is a response to that. It allows Africans to trade among themselves, to value their own resources. The text 12 Years a Slave shows us the horror of slavery, but also the resistance and the will for freedom. This will is now channeled into economic and political projects. Modern Pan-Africanism is also technology. Startups like Flutterwave, Online Payment and Andila, develop or train and connect African talents to the world. They create a Pan-African digital economy. There are also initiatives like Africa Code Week that train millions of young people in programming. The idea is that Africa must be master of its digital transformation. Pan-Africanism is no longer just an ideology of liberation, it is an ideology of construction. It is about building infrastructure, networks, markets. Railways, highways, undersea internet cables are the new arteries of African unity. For example, the Cairo-Cape Town Trans-African Highway is a physical integration project. Contemporary Pan-Africanism is therefore a mosaic of actions, political, economic, technological, and cultural. Second part, culture and art as drivers of Pan-Africanism. Art is a powerful vector of modern Pan-Africanism. Music, cinema, fashion, and literature create a sense of common belonging. Take music. Artists like Burna Boy, Nigeria, who sings African Giant, or Wizkid, who collaborates with artists from around the world, carry a Pan-African message. Their music videos show images of a proud, modern, and united Africa. The musical genre Afrobeats has become a global phenomenon, uniting young people from across the continent and the diaspora. There is also Nollywood, Nigerian cinema, which produces thousands of films each year, telling African stories by Africans. These films are watched throughout Africa and the world. They create a shared imaginary. Fashion is also a field of expression. Designers like Omosai, Senegal or Lisa Falawiyo, Nigeria mix traditional fabrics, like bogolan or wax print with modern cuts. It is a strong identity affirmation. The poems and texts of African American poetry are a source of inspiration. They show that the African American diaspora has always been connected to Africa. Poets like Langston Hughes or Maya Angelou spoke of Africa as a motherland. Today, contemporary artists like Beyoncé, with her album Black is King, celebrate this connection. The document A Tramp's Sketches speaks of the spiritual quest of a tramp in Russia and the Middle East. It reminds us that the quest for identity is universal. F.O.
RAM in 2019 to encourage the diaspora to come and settle on the continent. This is lived Pan-Africanism. Social media plays a key role. Hashtags like Africarising or the Africa the media never shows you spread positive images of Africa. Influencers and bloggers tell a different story of Africa. Art and culture are therefore powerful weapons to deconstruct stereotypes and build a proud, forward-looking Pan-African identity. SCP Third Part, The Challenges of Contemporary Pan-Africanism. Modern Pan-Africanism is not a smooth journey. It faces immense challenges. The first is political fragmentation. Africa has 54 states, each with its own laws, currencies, and priorities. Integration is slow. For example, the AfCFTA is signed, but its implementation is complicated due to differences in regulations and insufficient infrastructure. Borders inherited from colonization divide peoples who were once united. Armed conflicts, like in the Sahel, Somalia, derinder integration and destroy wealth. The second challenge is economic. Africa is still too dependent on exporting raw materials, oil, minerals, cacao-rich countries. Economic Pan-Africanism aims to industrialize the continent and create local value chains. For example, instead of exporting raw cocoa, it should be processed into chocolate in Africa. But this requires investment and technology. The third challenge is brain drain. Many educated young Africans leave the continent to seek a better life in Europe or America. It is a paradox. Africa trains talent but cannot always retain it. However, the diaspora is also a strength. It sends billions of dollars each year. Remittance participates in development. The fourth challenge is cultural unity. Africa is incredibly diverse, hundreds of languages, religions, traditions. Building a Pan-African identity without erasing this diversity is a balancing act. Pan-Africanism must be unity in diversity. Documents like Frank Among the Rancheros, although about American ranch, remind us of the importance of adventure and discovering new horizons. For young Africans, the challenge is to imagine and build a common future. This requires education. Agenda 2063 emphasizes scientific and technical education. We need to train African engineers, doctors, and entrepreneurs. Pan-Africanism must also respond to global challenges like climate change. Africa is the most vulnerable continent, but also the one with the most potential for renewable energy, solar, wind. Projects like the Great Green Wall, reforestation of the Sahel Pan-African initiatives. Despite the obstacles, the momentum is there. Young people are increasingly connected, informed, and eager for change. SCP Fourth Part, Pan-Africanism in Daily Life, Concrete Examples.
To create a single African currency. By this would facilitate trade. Next, transport. The airline Ethiopian Airlines is a Pan-African model. It connects more than 60 African cities to each other, far more than any European airline. It is a Pan-African infrastructure. There is also the African passport. The AU has launched a biometric passport that will allow its holders to travel visa-free to all member countries. It is a strong symbol of unity. In the field of education, the AU has created specialized Pan-African universities, space sciences, water sciences, etc., to to train a continental elite. In daily life, Pan-Africanism is seen in cultural exchanges. A young person in Abidjan can watch a Nigerian film, listen to Ghanaian music, wear clothing inspired by Kent cloth, and eat jollof rice, a dish shared by several countries. Social media allows conversations between young people across the continent. Hashtags like African Union or Pan-Africanism are used to discuss common projects. Sport is also a vector. The Africa Cup of Nations, AFCO football tournament is a moment of Pan-African celebration. Players like Sadio Mane, Senegal Mohamed Salah, edupair heroes for the entire continent. The document The Game and the Candle speaks of decisions and choices. Pan-Africanism is a daily choice, to prioritize African products, support African artists, inform oneself about the realities of the continent, get involved in associations. It is also a political choice, to vote for leaders who believe in African integration. For a middle school student in France, Pan-Africanism can be lived by learning about the history of Africa, reading African authors, listening to African music, and being proud of one's roots, whatever their origin. Pan-Africanism is ultimately a way of seeing the world, a world where Africa is no longer on the periphery, but at the center of its own destiny. SEP Deep Dive, Pan-Africanism and New Technologies. Let's go further. How is tech redefining Pan-Africanism? First, fintech, financial technologies. Startups like M-Pesa in Kenya or Orange Money in West Africa allow millions of people to access banking services via their phones. This facilitates economic exchanges between countries. Next, digital identity. Projects like My Data or ID 2020 aim to give a legal identity to all Africans, which is crucial for voting, traveling, or opening a bank account. This strengthens Pan-African citizenship. Online education is another area. Platforms like Edukoya, Nigeria Ubongo, Tanzania offer online courses to millions of children. They create a Pan-African curriculum. Telemedicine allows doctors in one country to diagnose patients in another. It is concrete Pan-African solidarity. Solar energy is also a key sector. Street.
Building data centers to store their citizens' data on the continent, rather than leaving it to American or Chinese giants. It is a form of digital liberation. There is also artificial intelligence, AI. African researchers are developing AI solutions for agriculture, predicting harvests, health, diagnosing diseases, or finance. Machine learning can help solve specifically African problems. The document The Tramp Sketches speaks of the quest for meaning. Today, young Africans are in search of meaning through technology. They want to be makers and not just users. Tech hubs like BuyHub in Nairobi, CC Hub in Lagos, or Tla Frishan in Abidjan are places where young entrepreneurs meet, exchange, and create Pan-African solutions. The Pan-Africanism of the future will go through decentralized networks, blockchains, and cryptocurrencies. Some already imagine a Pan-African cryptocurrency that would bypass traditional banks. Finally, space Pan-Africanism exists. The African Union has launched the African Space Agency to coordinate the continent's space programs. Satellites like BSAT-1, Ethiopia and Nigeria SATs help manage natural resources, agriculture, and natural disasters. Space is a new frontier of unity. Tech therefore allows the Pan-African dream to be concretized in a concrete, fast, and decentralized way. SEP methods and tips for understanding and remembering. To understand this course well, here are some tips. First, visualize Africa as a single imaginary country. Ask yourself, if Africa were a single country, how would it work? This will help you grasp the issues of integration. Next, create a mind map. In the center, write modern Pan-Africanism. Around it, add branches, economy, AFCFTA, culture, music, films, politics, AU, Agenda 2063, technology, startups, fintech, challenges, borders, conflicts. Use different colors for each branch. Third, link each concept to a concrete example. For example, when you think of economic integration, think of the AFCFTA. When you think of Pan-African culture, think of Burna Boy or Nollywood. Fourth, use the source documents as anchors. The narrative 12 Years a Slave reminds you why unity is necessary. African American poetry shows you the connection with the diaspora. The books A Tramp's Sketches inspires you to be curious about the world. Fifth, discuss with your classmates. Organize a debate on the theme, Is a United Africa Possible? Or what is the role of the diaspora in Pan-Africanism? Finally, follow the news. Read articles on the African Union website or on Jeune Afrique. Watch documentaries about today's Africa. The more you inform yourself, the more concrete Pan-Africanism will become for you.
Sea of Pan-Africanism. L'African Questions by Tidiane Dio and L'Afrique au Secours de l'Afrique by Abbé Pierre are accessible works. Watch films. Black Panther, even though it's a Marvel movie, is a fantastic gateway to futuristic Pan-Africanism. Lumumba, by Raoul Peck, tells the story of a Pan-Africanist leader. The Burial of Kojo, on Netflix, a beautiful Ghanaian film. Listen to podcasts. Afrobytes or the African Tech Roundup talk about tech and innovation in Africa. Pan-African Podcast is dedicated to Pan-African ideas. Visit websites. The African Union website, o.in, is a mine of information. Also check African Arguments or the Africa Report. Ask yourself open questions. How can Pan-Africanism help fight climate change in Africa? What is the role of women in modern Pan-Africanism? How can young people participate in African integration? Is Pan-Africanism a utopia or a reality in progress? How can France contribute to positive Pan-Africanism? Finally, get involved. Join an association like Africa France or Solidarite Afrique. Participate in youth forums. If you have the opportunity, travel to Africa. Nothing replaces direct experience. Pan-Africanism is a living movement. It needs you to continue growing. So, do not hesitate to ask questions, learn, and act.